Good morning, my friends. Today, it's another gray, cold day. Pretty typical for November day. As you might have noticed, I was not here yesterday. And as you may also notice, I have a haircut. Yesterday, I went down to a movie studio way out in the middle of industrial Montreal. And because I signed up to be an extra in this World War II movie, so I had to go down there and get a haircut, get fitted for my costume, and I was pretty much there for several hours, and then walked back because I didn't feel like paying for an Uber. An Uber was like $20 to get there, so I ended up walking back, which is like around another couple hours. So by the time I got back, I had some other stuff to do, and I didn't really feel like doing a vlog that day, so I was kind of busy. But today it's Friday, as all of you may have known, and so I'm doing another book review. Today I have The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. This book was written, I believe, 1910, something like that. 1906 was when this was published. It's basically a recollection of the meat packing industry, specifically from the, I think he's Lithuanian. It's been around a year since I've read this book. He's a Lithuanian worker, immigrant, who works at this meat packing facility, and you basically just see the grime and the drudgery of that work during that time period. Definitely one of those critiques of capitalism books, which I think is fair to say, especially during this time. During this time, industrialization was quite brutal, much more brutal than it is today, depending on which country you live in, obviously. If we're thinking about industrialization today in America and Canada, it's definitely nowhere near to what it is during this time period. You see the filth and the brutal conditions that some of these people had to work in. I will say, though, I read this book right after reading Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, so I can get a balance, so to speak. You have these two different poles, extreme poles, right, that you want to keep balanced, so that way you don't sort of fall into pitfalls. This book, I can tell, is very much exaggerated for the most part, which is fine. He's trying to convey his message. It is based off of true events. He did go around and actually interview people to get a real life feel of what it's like there. But this book is basically a compilation of probably every single bad thing that he's ever heard from someone, like just compressed into one person, which obviously isn't going to be the most, I guess, accurate, you would say, or most real life situation that someone might have there. It's definitely like a worst case scenario that a person might live through during that time. Even still, there's still certain things that happens that are pretty brutal, and they're not exactly digestible. They're very bleak, so to speak. And I think it has some merits in describing America at that time, especially the working force. And of course, at the end, the solution to all of this is socialism. And, he goes on a whole rant about how socialism will save everything, blah, 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 which is, fine, whatever. The author was a socialist at that time. Socialism was generally a very new kind of political movement. It's definitely not blameworthy to misinterpret at that time, because during that time socialism was very new. No one knew anything about it that much, really. It was only existed in kind of like experiments, and in some countries, this is 1906. That was like 1 year after the Russian Revolution started, so no one really had any understanding of socialism to its full degree, in terms of the bureaucracy and whatnot, and the ultimate suffering that originated afterwards from it. So it's understandable why this book was written, and it does raise some points about what capitalism was at that time. Um, People like to sort of describe these movements with today, and they're very, very, very different. I mean, you read this book and you just see the conditions these people lived in, the political structure these people lived in. I mean, it's a completely different world, right? Um, you have workers on strike, and then the police would basically be bribed to beat them up and make them stop striking and go back to work. Uh, you can't really do that nowadays, especially in America or Canada. You basically get fucked over if you ever try to do that. It generally doesn't happen right now. Um, Strikes don't even happen that much to begin with. So, the conditions at this time were a lot different. It was a lot more corrupt. And I think the corruption in general is an indicator to the problems that we're having. It's not necessarily the political system. As we can see throughout history, no matter what sort of system, the real problems come from corruption, and it comes from, lack of just lack of human decency and lack of a strong culture. At this time, America was very new and developing very quickly, and it didn't have any sense of values at that time. It was very much about expansion, about people sort of looking after themselves. It was very much a melting pot, so to speak, at the time as well. You had immigrants coming from all different kinds of cultures, and they didn't really mingle together very well. And there was a lot of tension in that fields culturally. Most people, there wasn't really a sense of being an American at the time. 1906, that's it's to us it feels like a long time ago, but it's actually not that long ago in the span of history. But we can see that things have changed a lot, especially reading this book. It was actually one of the books that I think it was Teddy Roosevelt read, and he actually created the FDA because of it, which was good. But then I think he ended up meeting with Upton Sinclair and talking to him, and he ended up really not liking the author very much at all, and kicked him out of his office or something like that. But either way, this book did lead to the creation of the FDA to make sure that food was regulated, because at the time, there was a lot of problems with the food, and I think that was a good thing to expose, right? That the conditions in the food that was being processed was very poorly managed. It was just very dirty. It was just very unsanitary. It's a better word. You would have meat that was infected with tuberculosis, and that would be grinded up, and they would put just paint thinner in it to make it look more appetizing. Just very bad stuff. It was very not. We think about how processed food today is bad. You look back then, it was way, way worse. So we can see how things have progressed and changed a lot since that time. And it's, it is eye-opening in a sense to understand why these movements like socialism started. And they had very ample reasons to start, because at that time it was a very different world than what we live in today. Today it's a lot better, a lot better conditions. People complain a lot about their work situations. Oh, I work at Starbucks. 10-hour shifts. You should try thinking about what your grandparents did in the early 20th century, because they had it way, way, way worse. And reading this book, I'm definitely a lot more grateful that I don't live during that time. It was a very different time, obviously. And organized crime was rampant as well. That was another big issue, which has thankfully been calmed down a lot more nowadays. We don't have that same level of corruption, which I like to emphasize again. Is one, I think, if you want to look at this book and see it as a critique of capitalism, I think you should really look at it more as a critique of corruption just in general. I don't believe in looking towards blaming systems in general, and that's something that's taken me about a couple of years to sort of fully grasp. and not really face judgment based off of just general words that don't really have much meaning otherwise. At its plainest degree, it's just human corruption, humans just fucking each other over to gain a profit. And this doesn't come from a system, it just comes from, you know, motives, so to speak. It comes from a lot of different things. It's a lot more complex than just saying it's a political economic system. It comes from various different factors that we have to look into. Mostly, for my belief, it comes from culture, which I think this book definitely emphasizes. There's a strong culture of cynicism and bribery, which is one of the main things. It's one of the main reasons why conditions were so horrid was because of bribery, which is definitely one of those things that tends to ruin a lot of things. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that book. It's definitely a good book to read. I definitely enjoyed reading it as a way to sort of understand things, but I also realized that it is very, I wouldn't say it's ham-fisted, but it's definitely like he definitely is trying to push his agenda towards you as the author. So it's good to take things with a grain of salt and realize that everything that's happening in this book is not 100% true, despite people might thinking it is. And I think that's an important distinction to make. So anyways, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.